Hey everybody, welcome back to Information Graphics. This lesson is all about bar charts. Bar charts, also called column graphs, can be used to measure quantities over time and examine trends, just like a line chart can, but they often deal with discrete quantities of things at a particular time or in a particular group. They are useful when comparing the same data between similar entities. For example, in this chart, the number of tornadoes in each U.S. state over a period of time. Bar charts can display both positive and negative values and can also be used to chart progress. The bars can be either horizontal or vertical, and usually with horizontal bars, the value and category axes are opposite the ones you'd find on a line chart. So let's make some. My data, the average high and low temperatures per month in Phoenix, Arizona, is in a format called tab delimited. That means the data points are separated by tab stops. I can move those tab stops in the rich text document just to demonstrate, but usually your data will be in plain text and it won't look so neat. It just has to have a tab stop between each value on each line. So I'll just copy this, then go to Apple Numbers and paste it into a blank sheet. I'll go up to the charts and choose a vertical bar graph, and there you have it. The high temperatures are in blue and the lows are in green, with their respective bars side by side. I'll add more steps to the value axis, which in this case is the y-axis, so I get nice round numbers. Let's make this same chart in Illustrator. The Graph tool in Illustrator makes a distinction between a chart with vertical bars, they call that a column graph, and one with horizontal bars, which they just call a bar graph. So we'll choose column graph, drag out an approximate size, then you can either paste in your data or import it by pressing this button. I'll choose my plain text document, the data is imported, and then I'll click Apply. And there's your typical, not very good looking chart in Illustrator. Another option is to go back to Numbers, select the whole chart, then copy it. Go back to Illustrator and paste it into your document. The data is not editable at this point, but everything else comes over pretty clean. If you look at it in outline mode, there's this rectangle path that can be deleted, and a white-filled rectangle that you may also want to get rid of. And now you can change the colors and edit the text, just as you would with any other Illustrator file. Here's my finished graph. I decided to stick with one global color, and that way if it has to be printed in black and white, it's still easily readable. I added a title with pertinent information, added the degree symbol and an F for Fahrenheit, and I also adjusted the grid lines and increments to multiples of 10 rather than 11 as it was in Numbers. I could have done that before I copied and pasted, but just so you know. Lastly, I added a source for my data so readers know that it's reputable and reliable. Another kind of bar chart is a stacked bar or column graph. These measure the total number of something, in this case humans in space, and break it down into subsets, in this case countries. In this chart, the data is also plotted over time, which gives you a picture of the history of space travel and the major players involved. I'm going to make a smaller version of this chart and use data in a CSV file. CSV stands for comma separated value, and if I open it in TextEdit, you can see that my data points are separated by commas. Pretty straightforward. I could copy and paste this data into Apple Numbers, or I can open it directly from there. I'll make sure it's selected, then go up to the charts and choose a stacked graph, and there you have the number of humans in space, broken down by decade and country. This is an important thing to remember. A stacked graph is used when you want to display the cumulative total of something, broken down by different sets. So for example, you would not use a stacked graph for the temperatures. If I put that data into a stacked column graph, I'd end up with temperatures in the 170 degree range. It's hot in Phoenix, but it's not that hot. You can use horizontal bars to visualize a list of data such as this, which shows the number of tornadoes by state in the last half century. I'm going to use tab delimited data, and I'll make this in Illustrator. I'll choose the bar graph tool, then import my data. A general rule with a chart like this is to have higher numbers at the top in descending order. It's hard to get a picture of the data if it's not organized or arranged logically. If I go back and try to edit my data in Illustrator, I can't sort the columns. Illustrator's graph tool is pretty basic in this regard, so I'll go back to Apple Numbers. I'll just paste the data into the table, then sort the column and create my chart. Numbers makes the charts pretty small, as we've seen, so I'm going to have to enlarge it to see everything. Not all of the state names are displayed, so I'm going to try and adjust the point size until I can see every label on my category axis. And there we go. So as I said, it's best to arrange the data numerically in descending order. An exception, however, is when you have a list that's usually displayed in alphabetical order, like the names of the US states. People will probably want to see the percentage in their own state, so an alphabetical list makes it easier to find. In that case, you might choose to highlight the highest and lowest percentages, because that's interesting information to readers as well. Okay, now it's time for the do's and don'ts. Always have a zero baseline. There are no exceptions to this rule. You can sometimes get away with starting somewhere else in a line chart, but when you truncate the bars in a bar graph, you misrepresent the data. In this example, it looks like column D is about 1/4 the size of column C, but in reality, it's more than half its size. Always double check your data. If you see something that doesn't look quite right, go back to the source. This is true for all types of charts, of course. The graphic is only as good as the data on which it's built. In this example, if you're sure that column D is correct, it helps to add a label to it, because such a small sliver of a bar is hard to read. Don't use a double bar graph like this. In the West, anyway, numbers to the left of 0 are negative. This data would be best displayed in a vertical bar graph with the columns side by side, just like we did with the high and low temperatures. Numbers to the left of 0 are negative, and you can use a different color to emphasize this. Always sort the data in a horizontal bar graph in numerical order. An exception is when you have a list that is typically displayed alphabetically. Also in a horizontal bar chart, it can be hard to see the values even with grid lines. A better solution is to label each bar directly. If you need to draw attention to one amount or label, you can do that with color or shading. Speaking of color and shading, don't do something like this. It may be fun to play with Illustrator's pattern fills, but it adds nothing to the information and just makes it harder to read. Ouch, my eyes! Stay away from neon colors, and even if you use a monochromatic palette, don't alternate lights and darks. It gives people a headache. Put the shades in order from light to dark. Don't use 3D. It has no meaning and it distorts the data. Where's the top of this bar, for example? Is it here or here? Same goes for cylinders, drop shadows, and the like. It adds no information to your graphic. Something like this? Well, it's just embarrassing that it's even an option in Apple Numbers. I'm sure Excel has similar atrocities. Stay away. Lastly, you may be tempted to turn your bars into flowers or pencils or barrels of oil. And it's true that yours truly created a tutorial on how to do just this sort of thing. But I am telling you now, it's all just decoration, not information. So don't do it. Alright, next time we'll talk about pie charts. See you then.